the truth will come out, and the truth shall set you free. Don't be surprised. Gender is going to sneak out. It always does. It always has. Amy Coney Barrett has 7 kids. Wouldn't be surprised if one of those kids is wearing her knickers at times.
Right? Right.
Welcome to the Joy Tuck Club, the podcast that celebrates the beauty and diversity of transgender individuals and identities. I'm Rachel, my pronouns are she, her, and with me is my wife and co-host, the beautiful Phoebe.
Thanks, Rachel. Also she, her. I'm excited.
Are you excited?
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not anger?
Why would it be anger? Yes, I'm excited.
Okay, why are you so excited? What are we doing today?
Well, you know how we normally have a transpiration special, or we talk with a gender-affirming care expert if we're not just gabbing on?
Yes.
Well, today, in a first for the JTC, we're doing both.
Right, we've never had 2 interviewees on a single episode before.
I know, and we're not doing that either.
What?
Yeah, we're talking to someone who combines both. The transpirational gender-affirming surgeon, Dr. Marci Bowers.
Ah, that would explain why you're so excited.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I should explain to our listeners that when we started doing these gender-affirming care interviews, we had one name at the top of the list that we absolutely wanted to get, and it was Dr. Marci Bowers.
It was. And, it took a while, but we were so grateful she agreed to talk with us, and she was so generous with her time too.
She was. Should we run through some of Marci's incredible achievements?
Sure. Dr. Marci Bowers is a gynecologist, but is also a pioneer in the field of gender-affirming surgery.
And she's the first transgender woman to perform bottom surgery. And in 2020, she became the first person in history, I love this stat, to have delivered 2,000 babies and performed 2,000 vaginoplasties for transgender women.
I know.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
It's just astonishing. But it goes further than this, because she's also the first US surgeon to learn the technique of functional clitoral restoration and has worked to restore the clitoral function of hundreds of survivors of female genital mutilation, while also setting up clinics to educate others on the technique.
And she's a true champion for transgender healthcare and has been very prominent in the media, albeit in friendlier times. Is also the immediate past president of WPATH.
Oh, right. And as a reminder, in our last episode, we talked with the WPATH President-elect, Dr. Lauren Schechter, and we should probably try to interview the current Pres too.
Oh, how very Dickensian. You will be visited by 3 WPATH presidents. But getting back to Marci, she's also served on the boards of the Transgender Law Centre, GLAD, and the Trevor Project.
And been featured in various documentaries. She's made loads of media appearances, and she's always raising awareness about transgender health and rights.
She's even appeared on Oprah.
She has, and now she's on the Joy Tuck Club.
Which I bet is the highlight of her career.
Shall we play the interview?
Absolutely. This was such a great interview, and we covered so much that we've had to split it into 2 episodes, which is a first for us.
Yeah, so in this one, we discuss Marci's transition, her work as an OBGYN, and then taking over the clinic of the founder of gender confirmation surgery in the US, and a lot more besides.
And you'll find that she's refreshingly candid.
Uh-huh.
So, Phoebe, do you want to do the honours?
Sure. Sit back, everyone, relax, and enjoy part 1 of our interview with Dr. Marci Bowers. Cue the harp. Well, hello, Dr. Marci Bowers. We are so thrilled that you've been able to join us at the Joy Tuck Club. We've been waiting to talk with you for what seems like ages, and we're so glad you could find the time.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, and tis I that's delayed us even a few moments longer. So, with my apologies, I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
We want to talk about a few things, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
One will be your transition. We talk to transpirations all the time on this podcast, and we find that, any element of a story can be useful for someone else at whatever stage of transition they are. And then we'll move on to your surgical career and
Sure.
WPATH leadership and functional clitoral restoration and the Trevor Project too, if you may, because they all I guess, intersect.
There's some intersectionality between them, no question.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
S-
Including clitoral restoration, which is interesting because the presumption is that by many is that gender transition is somehow sexual, or people try to sexualize it,
yeah,
and by like assigned males coming in to invade women's spaces as though it's some sort of titillating notion. And of course, anyone who's been through it knows that couldn't be farther from the truth. And in fact, we're not only are we just trying to use the restroom, really, what it's really all about is just identity. And the same presumption goes towards women who seek clitoral restoration. There is certainly a secondary sexual goal that they're trying to achieve some pleasurable sensations that they can
yes.
utilize in their personal lives. But the number one reason why women choose to have clitoral restoration is their sense of self and feeling that their identity has been taken by the cultural act of FGM.
It's a physical means to a psychological restoration, which is what we all seek in all of our transition surgeries.
It's totally true. It's really true. Yeah.
Well, so what was your journey like? When did you realize you were transgender, and how did you deal with those feelings? You grew up in a small town, you had 4 siblings.
Right.
Was there any awareness or support from your parents? What can you talk
Oh
about?
Lord, no. We didn't even we had no idea what such a thing was. I was a rather classic case. I mean, I think some of our detractors are saying, there's this new herd of trans people who never had a notion of it at all when they were little wee ones, little children. But I don't think it necessarily has to follow that formula. There really is no formula for discovering, gender diversity. But for me, in particular, I was rather classic in that I identified more with my sisters, and so gravitated towards their playthings. Even though I was told, assigned male, I could, and I fit in rather well with the boys. We could do things, and I tried to play their games, but physically, I was very, very slight. I was tall, but I was very thin. And even aside from my physicality, I was just always more interested in how the girls thought and how the girls communicated and the things they did. It was much, much more to my liking. And so, so there it was. So cross-dressing and those sorts of things. But even at 4 years old, I remember being alarmed when my father walked in on us, and I was in my sister's tights, and I had to hide underneath a bed for 2 hours and pretend I wasn't home. I was like, where'd they go? Where'd they go? That kind of thing. And then when President Kennedy was shot, I was in my mother was napping, and I don't know where my sisters were, but somehow I was in my sister's Sunday dress. She had this little yellow chiffon thing, and I was tiny like her, so I could there I was. That was 5 years old. So, it's like, these are my earliest memories. And so that's just how it went. But I even left college with the idea that I'd try to transition, and at age 19, I managed to make an appointment at the University of California, San Diego, at an I didn't know what else. I thought hormones, endocrinology. I wasn't a medical student yet, so endocrinology. You get hormones. So I went in there to be prescribed hormones, and only to be turned away and rather embarrassed. And it took me another 21 or I guess 16 years to get back to it.
So age 19 in San Diego, You couldn't afford any surgeries. Was that a galvanizing moment with regards to your career? Did you ever think at the time that you'd end up at the pinnacle of gender-affirming care?
No, no, I didn't. But I did think that. I mean, I'd always been, if not the smartest kid in class, I was one of the smartest kids. So I did well throughout school, and it was kind of like that was the formula, was that if you were the smart ones, they went into medicine. Now I suppose they'd go into IT or something, or anything but medicine. But back then, that's what we did. So I had that in my mind, but being denied, yeah. I mean, it wasn't really a formula that necessarily fit. I think I just professionally, medicine made sense to me because I was artistic also, and I was smart, and that was a field, something where you could put both of those together. Plus, I like people, so it was. I think that was really the formula for me.
It wasn't a case of you couldn't have the surgeries, so you're like, well, screw them, I'm going to become a surgeon.
No, but I did feel that way about gynecology, though. I was always, I was the president of my medical school class at the University of Minnesota. And so, I had all sorts of accolades, and I guess I was a natural leader because they kept getting elected to things. And so here I was president of the class, and so I was going to be this cardiologist, and then I thought about it. I was like, cardiologist is it? I was fighting these gender issues. I was just on the side. I was, I was dating girls, and I was pretending to, and I eventually got married in medical school, but I said, well, I kind of said no on the, kind of as it was time to make a decision about what field to specialize in, and I chose OB-GYN, and kind of shocked people, I think, a little bit. They didn't think they didn't think I was going to go that direction. But it was like, and I said this to Oprah Winfrey when I was on the show. Uh, she said something very outrageous, like, "So you look at JJ's all day, and then you decide you want one? Is that it?"
What? Oh dear.
Honest to God, that was like her question. And so I was like, no, I said, I saw in women's lives what I felt like should be my life. And
Yes.
and as I took care of them, rather than being satisfied with that, living it vicariously, I wanted to own more of it. And so it just drew me closer.
Well, that makes sense. So you didn't become a surgeon to take your own surgery into your own hands.
No, and then then following Dr. Biber again, I had no intention of leaving OB-GYN. I loved it as a woman provider. I was trusted by women. I was deeply stealth. In fact, I was almost hired by a group of Seventh-day Adventists, OBGYN, because I wanted to work less and spend more time with my three kids. At that time, I had amassed three kids, and so I almost took this job as the first female provider in a Seventh-day Adventist practice outside of Seattle.
Oh my lord, so to speak.
Completely stealth, and I was like, who am I? Then I was like, who am I fooling? So this was just, a couple of years after my transition. So I was inadvertently outed by a pharmaceutical rep who used to call on me in my old clinic position. And so I was faxed a withdrawal of my employment agreement.
Wow.
Well, you're fired.
Well, then I was still at my other job, so I couldn't leave. You see, I was voluntarily trying to get out, and then I was basically pushed out by my job because while they had supported me during my transition, 5 years they didn't expect me to be successful, and at that point I had become the busiest OBGYN provider in the group. And people were like they weren't openly hostile, but it was like this covert, it was a different form of discrimination that I've ever felt. And so they were, I think there were some maybe that were men or something that were embarrassed by me being there still. It's kind of like the
Right. Right.
backlash we're feeling now. It's just so eerie, creepy, probably religious a little bit. And so they suggested I had Medicare violations and other nefarious things that they were, drumming up. And so I resigned, and it was after that. Then that's where the new job came up. And then when I received that fax letter, I had just attended my first Harry Benjamin meeting in Galveston, Texas.
Really?
And so when I
The
received that
precursor to
fax,
WPATH.
that's right. When I received that fax, I had decided I had met Dr. Biber a couple of years earlier, and I
Yeah.
decided, I say, well, that's it. So I asked my boyfriend at the time, and I asked my spouse if I could bring my son, and everybody agreed to move, and that was it. It just came together.
Right. And
Yeah, but that's
yeah.
how life is sometimes. One door closes and another one opens, and yeah, I guess I'm an eternal optimist, and I kind of feel that way about the present days. Is that we're clearly not going to go away. I think that there's just too much momentum in the world to go back to a time where gender is strictly binary. I mean, that's just a very third grade world, look at things, third grade
Right.
biology look
Yeah.
at things.
They can legislate for it, but they can't bury it.
No,
They
they're
can't
not
bury the
really.
reality.
No, I
Um,
mean, Hitler tried to put us in concentrate, he tried to exterminate us, but I think we're too big for even that now.
yeah. I've got a question regarding your time with Dr. Biber. He performed, he's known as the father of gender affirming surgery. Certainly in the US, he performed the first surgery in 1969. You were, what, about 10 years old at that time?
Yes, I guess I'd be 11. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right. But you ended up taking over his practice. You became the first trans woman to perform gender affirming surgery or bottom surgeries.
Hmm.
And this is an extraordinary journey. My question is there anything about it that you would change? Do you have any regrets from things that happened on the way?
Oh, momentary regrets, maybe. I wish I would have been nicer to my sister when I was growing up. Um, One of them I was, but so regrets about my own, I guess escalation from having
Yeah.
taken over from Dr. Biber. Yeah, maybe a couple things. One thing is he never. Well, I just had I actually, this just is off track, but I just found out yesterday that a good friend of mine had died
Oh,
last week, and I
sorry.
was, so I've been very, very reflective on that, and I think that, and the same thing happened when Dr. Biber passed, if you've ever experienced close deaths in your life,
Mm-hmm.
it comes at you. It comes at you quicker than you think, and so it's really true. Life is short, and so you never let an opportunity to praise someone, never let an opportunity to experience a moment with someone, never let those things go by. And
Yeah.
I'm getting better at that. I really, but I really, really think that's important. And Dr. Biber and I only worked together on about 10 surgeries before I took over.
Really?
In July of 2023. Yeah, he was 80 years old by then, and people were having to travel all the way to this little tiny town. And so he was only doing a handful of surgeries every year. So it was, but so I worked with him. But luckily, by the grace of God, I had enough. I really had very good training, and I was known to be a good surgeon. So I was able to adapt very quickly and not only learn his technique but also evolve the technique and update
Yeah.
it. So it was really it was truly a miracle that it happened. But he never watched me operate.
Oh,
And so I have that regret, and I also regret that I never insisted that I watch him play the piano. He was like a concert pianist. Apparently, he was quite good, and I never saw him play. So
yeah.
it's probably a little bit. He's very proud, and he was always a little bit. He didn't, and others protected his legacy too. They just couldn't believe that a woman, let alone someone with my history, could even come close to his legacy. And I think in time he would have been very proud of me, and I think deep down he was, but he was too proud in the short time that I was working that he could ever come to humble himself to come and watch me operate. Yeah.
Yeah. Understandable. Well, I'm sorry you didn't get those opportunities.
Yeah, those are things that, so people, if there's a lesson to be learned, it's just, seize the moment, challenge yourself, do what you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but yeah, so that was a good question.
We've talked on this podcast about how trans women lose privilege, and that might be something that you've alluded to there, while trans men gain it. Do you think that was what you experienced in your transition?
Without question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Frankly, I've been, kind of obsessed about Donald Trump's executive orders and saying, these third grade things like, that there are only two genders and, you can't be, one can never become the other. And it's like, that is just complete folly because gender is a construct. It's a social construct. There have been books written about that very subject. And it isn't about you, Donald Trump. It isn't about it's about what society sees. And this is, after all, this is what we do. And if we get the right bells and whistles right and the right intonations in our voice, or society sees you as you are.
Yeah.
And the other thing I've talked to, and many cis people too, is surgeons and what have you. I go, have you ever seen let's say, because I mostly work in the trans feminine sphere, but also with trans men too, who are even sometimes more convincing, even sometimes on a transitional, on a social level. But even the most rough cut trans woman, I've I asked people, I said, has there ever been a patient that where you didn't really see them as women? And they said,
Yeah.
absolutely not. It's really, with some effort,
Yeah.
and, they really, they may not be your version of, they may not be your mother, but, they really are, they're definitely women. And I've really never felt that way about a single patient where I go, well, you're really, I can see the man, he used to say those unsavory things. I see the man in you, that kind of thing. And it's like, no, I really don't. I just see the woman. And
And
so anyway,
the proof is in the
gender is
misogyny.
very flimsy. It's very flimsy, and it's very, very, very diverse.
And yet it's such a minefield. We have switched our terminology from coming out to inviting in, to represent the idea that one has control over who you invite in, who you share your identity with, because it's can be such a fraught and even dangerous process these days. But we have a question that came from a listener.
Oh, but you said, did you feel just what would you say, sexism or discrimination as a woman? And yeah, I mean,
Misogyny.
Every, this is why I say It's like every other woman. I guess women relate so much to me because we're the same. We are. I am a woman. I've lived half my life this way. It's extraordinary. I live half the way the other way, half this way, and it's so different. Your voice isn't recognized as much. Your opinions are discounted. It's astounding. So, but you also get the good, and this is what cis women sometimes don't see, is that there is a sisterhood and a level of trust that's extended to women that men don't ever get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I used to call it a sisterhood, and it really is. And the one example I'll give you is if you've ever traveled through Chicago, I used to have so much travel in my day, and making connections, and I don't know where I was going. It was some odd hour, and I was exhausted, and I had quick grabbed a pizza in the airport, and then I was rolling my luggage and trying to juggle this box of pizza because, of course, it's big and bulky, and I went into the restroom, and you know, men, you'd be on your own, but in fact, men had probably, I don't know what they do, run off with it or something maybe, but a woman said to me, "Can I hold your pizza box while you pee?" Basically. Like she could see I was struggling, and so
Yeah.
she held my pizza box while I peed, and then I just it was a quick thank you and a hug, and it was just a nice thing that that would have never happened in a men's room.
No.
There's a lot of nice men, but I'm sorry, they wouldn't hold your pizza box while you urinated.
But also, doesn't this all come down to, look, if we can't change gender, then can you please explain where you find your sexism?
Yeah, right.
That suddenly is applied to us.
That's interesting.
Look, we had a question from a listener, and so it's a little off this track, but not too far. And it's that it was about sharing your identity with others, and specifically how you do it with your children. We both have children, and our let's say our mileage has varied in in the outcome. How did you manage it?
Well, first of all, I married. I guess I'd say I married my best friend, which is preposterous because we have this modern family, and I've had many, many partners, male, female, and everything in between, and uh, and not that many partners. Don't get me wrong, but but my I'm still married to my spouse that
Yeah.
we shared children with, and we joke about it sometimes when the family needs money. I say, well, listen, I'll go talk to daddy, and things like that, because daddy has the money. Because I'm just, I'm just Marcy. I do the cooking, and I'm, the cleaning, and so I'm just your mom. My son has lived with me most of his life, and so the kids, we just have a sense of humor about it. I guess
Yeah.
I'm lucky that's my Irish side,
Yeah.
and but we've always made light of it. The kids were 5 years, 4 years, and 1 years old when I transitioned. And so they've only really known me as their mom, although my oldest remembers having had a father.
Right.
But for them, it was, the first day I was Marcy. I've been she, her, and it has never varied since that day. They've never, made a mistake. Is that the word? But they've never misgendered me. But that's because of the respect and the friendship that I had with their other mother.
Do
Yeah.
they refer to you as mum?
Yep. Yeah. They all acknowledge they've got two mums. And fortunately, we've lived mostly in the west coast of the U.S., so having two moms isn't a isn't an abomination.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to change gear a little bit now. We're just going to talk a little bit about your media appearances. You've been on many TV programs, even starred in a reality TV series called Sex Change Hospital that documented the experience of some of your patients. Do you think with the changes to the political climate and even a chilling of general acceptance of transgender people, these same opportunities would exist today?
You know, I think that's another really great question, and obviously you've done your homework. I would, well, for sure, the climate in Hollywood is just, it's just off limits now to this topic. I think soon, once we see the end of the Trump years coming, I think there will be a reemergence of some of this programming, because I think that really is the way is to share the information with people. And I think I gave, not just me, but I think the programming that I did in the early 2000s, like Sex Change Hospital and so many documentaries we did, and short pieces, and CNN, and BBC, and even Al Jazeera. I was on so many networks over the years. I think that gave it a running start and got us a lot of the momentum. And that led into some of the more famous, notorious people who have come out. The UK's had a few famous persons. We had our Caitlyn Jenner and Laverne Cox, a Hollywood actress. They came after all of that. And I think in a way, our work and our telling stories back then made it possible for the others that followed. And do I think it could happen today? I can't even imagine. I'm not even sure I could survive today as a surgeon coming out, especially, with my background. I probably, and also my timing, if I had transitioned in medical school or during residency, I'm quite sure I would not have, made it through. But I do think I think there is some truth to spirituality, and if anyone has been guided by that, it's probably me, and I've got a lot of proof of that.
Yeah.
So I think I have full confidence that we're going to get through this time, and people will come to see that the trans experience is not only legitimate, it's not only biological, but it's also important for the world's evolution.
I guess you can probably pinpoint when the pendulum started to swing the other way, right? I mean, it happened to you with this article by Abigail Schreier published in 2021, right? And we noticed that you have a response on your website today, explaining that you were misquoted about puberty blockers before Tanner stage 2. Your comments were taken out of context and mischaracterized. So, curiously, what guidance would you give a trans child today and their parents on puberty blockers and timing for gender-affirming surgery?
Well, just to back that up a little bit,
Yes, sorry, there was a bit in there.
no, there's a lot there. Well, I still feel that I actually don't regret talking to Abigail Schreier, actually.
Yeah.
I think she perfectly characterized what I call the fear that's behind the turf movement, and the worried moms, the soccer moms who don't understand how they have a trans kid, or the two lesbians who have a daughter that wants to be male, or things like that. It's like, is this a I get that, what's happening? Everyone's turning trans. Our school has 3 kids and they're non-binary and what's going on, So it's all those fears. And actually, I after the interview, I actually went on. She sent me a copy of her book and I read it, and it was just like point after point about this is the fear that people have, and this is the stuff that we needed as the trans community we needed to address. And I still think it's out there. We haven't really met in the middle yet. Nobody's really come together. And I've always, prior to her, I never vetted any of my speakers. I took them at face value and I answered their questions because I felt like I could always turn a negative question or an angry question into something positive. Even this guy, Matt Walsh, although
Yeah.
he unfairly edited the piece there and left out, if he had published my entire interview, his documentary would have been over in 5 minutes. Because there's like a dozen ways to measure sex. So, to say what is a woman, well, there's about a dozen ways that you could say what is female. It doesn't, and it's not necessarily chromosomal. And it's not necessarily birth anatomy, and et cetera. It's not it's all that. There's an exception in biology to every rule.
Yeah.
Well, this is what they rely upon, isn't it? They deny that there's a spectrum. They deny the full range of possibilities, and they also denied you the right to give a complete response and edit it down to what suited them, which is what they're doing to us in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. The truth will come out, and the truth shall set you free. Don't be surprised. Gender is going to sneak out. It always does. It always has. Amy Coney Barrett has 7 kids. Wouldn't be surprised if one of those kids is wearing her knickers at times.
Right. Oh, I love that thought. Oh my God. So, what guidance would you give a trans child and their parents?
Oh yeah. That was the original question. So this is the important thing is, what we're providing. WPATH standards are just about providing healthcare. It's to a very small segment of the population. It'll never be 1%. It might be 2%, but it's never going to be a large percent of the population. And it's no threat to social order. And WPATH, I mean, it's a very, very scientifically evidence-based organization. We do our very best to really knowing the patient population we serve. We do our very best to provide the best care possible, and to provide science behind the guidelines. They aren't perfect. There are adjustments that need to be made, but this is what every field of medicine is like. You make decisions, you test hypotheses, you adjust, you learn from your mistakes or from your less than satisfactory outcomes, and you make adjustments. And this is the idea of blocking puberty is a relatively new phenomenon. It was, really only escalated after the Dutch began treating young adolescents in the mid 2000s, about 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
And then it was picked up in Boston by Norman Spack. And so a lot of these early puberty blocked now adults are coming of age and requiring surgery. And so my point in all of this was just that, and even with newer techniques, people sometimes try to dinosaur me, like young plastic surgeons come out and say, oh yeah, I'm just Dr. Bowers, just a dinosaur, she doesn't matter. We have newer techniques. Well, the newer techniques don't make up for the fact that when you block puberty at Tanner stage 2, you're freezing that person at a very infantile stage.
Right.
Now, socially, these kids don't regret. I won't say none because you can never say never and never say always, but they really are very happy they received puberty blockers. But I think in time, the advice will be that you wait until just a little bit of puberty. For one, it solves the fertility issues. So they have options for fertility. But most importantly is they'll have enough tissue that they can create a better surgical result when they come to have surgery.
And I think, as you've said elsewhere, the peritoneal pull-through method doesn't solve the lack of that tissue.
You really did your homework. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. And when I think you'll see it come out, somebody. I'm not a researcher. I'm a worker bee. I'm out the front line. But this will come out in research in the future. Is that it's surgeons all will agree that it's just harder to get a good result when you block quite so early.
What a great interview.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. They're all good interviews, but I feel like that one with Marci was right up there.
She's such a pleasure to talk to.
Absolutely.
What struck you?
A few things, but mainly the way that Marci, and all trans people really, we just go all in to find a way to transition.
Right.
Marci attempting to get hormones at 19 by visiting the endocrinology department at the University of California. Got turned away.
Yeah.
And then life got in the way, as it does with all of us.
Yeah.
But she still found a way to transition after all that.
Yeah. Yeah. She went off and studied medicine, became an OBGYN. That stat about the 2,000 births.
It's great.
Also 2,000 vaginoplasties, but 2,000 births. It really strikes me how much this trans woman has done for cis women.
Yeah.
Add to that, it's not the focus of this episode, will be for a future one, the over 500 clitoral restorations she's done for survivors of FGM. Absolutely extraordinary.
Well, we have kind of got her penciled in to follow up on that and do an episode just about that, haven't we?
Yeah.
And then you've got that Oprah interview, right?
Yes.
Dumbing things down to a ridiculous level. You spend all day looking at JJs, so you decided to get one?
Right. It's ludicrous, but Oprah deserves kudos in some respects, but she also gave us snake oil merchants like Dr. Oz. And so, is it any wonder?
No. If there's one truly important takeaway from this, it's that trans people will get through this, and Marci's optimism, she was adamant that things are going to get better for us.
Right.
So we should all just hold on to that. After all, what else are we going to do? We're not going anywhere.
No.
Right?
No. And that's why the next episode of the Joy Tuck Club
nice segue
has more Marci for you, including her surgical work, vaginoplasties, leadership at WPATH, and more. So please subscribe and you'll be notified when it drops. It's a lively episode. And meanwhile, thank you for listening, tuning in, being part of our community. If you want to connect with us further, visit our website, redandfreckles.com, where you can keep up to date on all things red and some of them freckly.
And you can also follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram and Facebook, but not Twitter. We use the handle @2damptrans on all of our platforms. And you can DM us if you have any questions or topics you'd like to discuss. Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of socials, I don't know if anyone actually pays attention to our socials. We did a post last week, because we get an email every week, right? From our from Buzzsprout, our podcast.
Yes, that's right.
With all of the stats, and we don't normally pay attention to them because we're not big statisticians. One that did stick out, was the number of countries.
Right.
How many was it?
44?
45.
Oh, 45.
Our podcast has been downloaded in 45 countries worldwide.
Yeah, that's pleasing, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. But I think we can do better.
Yeah.
I want to make the Joy Tuck Club truly trans-global.
Aha.
So what do we want people to do?
Well, find someone in some out-of-the-way place and suggest that they listen to an episode.
Just one. That's all we ask.
Yeah.
Let's get that 45 countries over 100.
Over 100?
So we'll be over half the globe would have listened to Red and Freckles.
We'll come back to you in the future with more stats.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, please subscribe and rate us. Help spread the word. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on all the popular platforms now.
And as always, most of the unpopular ones.
We do appreciate your feedback and support.
So until next time, remember you are valid.
You are beautiful.
And
And you are transcending boundaries.